4 aspects are the physical constituents of the soil, the physicality of the environment, okay? So how much drainage do you have? How compacted is the soil? Is it clay? Is it cindery? Is it Is there a hard pan underneath? What's happened to the soil? Has someone driven over it all you know, and compacted it? And what are we dealing with physically with the soil? And then there's a chemical aspect of the soil. What's the pH of the soil? How many nutrients are in the soil? How much calcium is there? Is the phosphate available? Has it been tied up with aluminum? Is it acidic? Is it alkaline? That's the chemical aspect. It's how we balance the minerals, and I'll get more specific about that as the talk goes on. And then there's the biology of the soil, which I think really fixes almost everything. Because a lot of people, and this is one of the problems I have with modern conventional farming, is they look at organic farming as, you know, just crazy people throwing compost on top of their stuff. This is the biology concept, okay? Now it's interesting that the conventional farmers are all following, to me, what almost a godlike guy to what we're talking about. He's really my huge mentor. I never met him, obviously, but he was a man named William Albrecht, and he was the chief soil scientist at the University of Missouri back in the 30s and 40s. And he brought us out of the Dust Bowl. He was the chief soil scientist for the USDA. And when they came in with all of the bomb-grade fertilizers, he didn't want to play along and basically left the USDA in 1950. But William Albrecht created all of the tests that we're going to be talking about today. He created all of the cation exchange stuff like that, and base saturation levels, all these different tests that conventional farmers used all came out of William Albrecht, who was basically organic. Okay, he was the organic guy. And now when they talk about organic, when the university talk, they just say, oh, throw some compost down and da-da-da-da. But really what we're talking about is very scientific, and it's analogous to a lot of the modern medicine. You know, the modern medicine guys came out of, you know, slash and burn, cut your organs out, let some blood out of you, and all of that. And yet the herbalists were the empiricalists, I think they were called. And it just depended on where the society was going. And now the herbal guys and the acupuncture world look like we're hocus pocus, because these guys are the scientists, but it's a pseudoscience that's been overlaid upon us. So when we talk about the chemistry of the soil, as an organic farmer, we can do a soil test. We can see how much calcium is in the soil. We can see how much calcium is available. We can see how the soil colloid is holding on to the what they call cations, and it's called cation exchange capacity or base saturation. And these numbers can indicate how we're supposed to be fertilizing and what we should do to fertilize, and what fertilizers should be. You know, because I believe in biological farming, and I have no problem with using a substance that maybe isn't organically derived, as long as it doesn't leave a residue, as long as it doesn't show up in the plant, doesn't show up in the groundwater, or doesn't show up in our nurture environment. If it's just taken up by the plant or converted by bacteria into something good, probably acceptable. And if anyone is a chemical farmer or a conventional farmer and wants to talk about what are the accepted chemicals that we would call biological chemicals, I'd be happy to talk with anybody about that later. And the fourth aspect that and the biology is obviously very, very important. Tab was talking about that, and that is the soil microbe, the life. A lady named Elaine Ingham talked about this food soil web. And it's literally hundreds of different bacteria eating funguses, and funguses eating bacteria, and protozoa eating the funguses. I mean, it's just this web of, and eventually putting out food to the plant. So a healthy soil feeds the plant. And the way we create a good biology is by introducing the proper biology. And this is why we're talking about Bokashi, we're talking about EM, we can talk about IMOs right now, where we can try to capture the beneficial organisms that are already here. There's a Korean natural farming that uses a rice preparation, and then they talk about fermentation and biology. And the interesting thing about Korean natural farming is it's also spiritual farming. And we're led into really the aspect that I think is the most important, the spiritual aspects of farming, where you're growing food that is your medicine. That there's a consciousness in the plants that we grow, and these plants transform themselves into our medicine. When you grow your own papaya tree, that papaya tree becomes medicine for you. I mean, it's hard to quantify, but I've experienced it. I mean, almost everything can be a medicine for us. So many foods. You know, people want to grow wheatgrass, right? And they go crazy. You know, why don't we just eat grass? I mean, I'm not saying why not. We should. There's really nothing wrong with it. I mean, when I first got here, it was like, wheatgrass? What? The cows were eating that, and we started juicing this stuff up. I started juicing up tea plant. Unbelievable medicine. Juice, you know the tea plant that grows around here? Not tea, Camilla, but the tea. Go chew on it. Tastes just like wheatgrass. It's the most healing food in the world. And this is, to me, what the spiritual aspect of this planet is. This planet, we are living on an incredibly beautiful, unique, perfect planet. A little speck of dust in a vast universe surrounding another. This is unbelievable. So the most important aspect of all this is the consciousness of the planet, the consciousness of the moon, the stars, the sun, and all of that. And then and that's the link with the biology, because there's a concept called biodynamic farming, right? Does anyone know where biodynamic farming? Rudolf Steiner. He talks about, he brings in the forces of the moon, he brings in the forces of the sun and of the planets, and then a man named Emmerich Pfeiffer, a scientist, said, you know, a lot of these deities that Steiner's talking about and all this energy is really biology. So it turns out that these bacteria are really now the kind of the conduit for the spiritual energy. And when we start looking at all the knowledge and the mysteries and this unbelievable stuff that I can't even explain to you, that it's just going to come down and be downloaded into us as we eat our own food, this is the real value of what we're doing. Whether you grow the most delicious papaya in the world, that's for you to say. But yeah. Oh, okay. And the idea is, and I know that everybody here that plants some of these papayas and goes home and does this and gets a papaya, you're going to eat that first papaya and you're going to think that's the very best, most delicious papaya you've ever eaten. And you can't buy that, okay? That isn't something you can go to the store and buy the most delicious papaya. The most delicious papaya you're ever going to eat is the one you're going to grow. And that's going to open up a whole world, because you're going to realize how easy it is to grow everything. And so when I plant papayas, like we're going to plant this orchard out, you know, I'd like to see some of these breadfruit trees get planted within it. Now the breadfruit needs to be protected from the sun at the beginning, you know, and because it's the way it is. The papayas are going to grow up and they're going to become the nurse crop for those breadfruits. Okay? And for 2 years, while you're taking care of this field, while you're waiting for the breadfruit, for 3 or 4 years it'll take for the breadfruit to fruit, you're harvesting papaya. And off an acre of papaya, a couple hundred papaya trees in your backyard, you could be selling it to Down to Earth or Whole Foods or whatever, and you could be making a couple $100 a week extra. My concept for papayas was never to have large-scale papaya growth. That's when the diseases come in. That's when the guys that are just doing it for the currency forget about the biology. They forget about the chemistry. The chemistry is expensive. So they'll just go in and basically destroy a place and leave, because they're just leasing the land. They don't care. They don't care about the chemistry. They don't even care about the physicality of it, because they're all they're trying to do is get a one-year crop in. But I believe in polyculture. I believe that plants want to grow together. Food forests, they talk about it. And the system that we live in here in Hawaii is the system that we have to start thinking about, which is the Ahupua'a system. And we have to understand that there's specific plants that grow in specific areas. And that we don't have the right, really, even though people do it, to go into an area that shouldn't grow papaya and try to grow papaya. I mean, grow papaya where you can, grow breadfruit where it should grow pineapple where it should grow, and find site-specific places, and it becomes a little bit easier. Unfortunately, you can't plant 10,000 acres out. But that's why we're having problems. That's why people are sick. And why? Because of people that believe that cheap food is going to make life better, but we know that cheap food is just making our health worse. So how do we reconnect with our spirituality? How do we reconnect with our own personal health? How do we reconnect with the living consciousness of this planet, of the moon, the stars, the sun? How do we really feel good about who we are? I really honestly believe it's doing the one thing that we have control of. There's only one thing that we really have control of, is what we put in our mouth. I mean, what comes out of your mouth too, obviously. But, and I want to tell you, it's all graciousness and love should be coming out of all our mouths, even though we're all imperfect. But what we put in our mouth. And if we are consciously putting foods in our mouth from people that we knew grew them, so we've closed the hoop, so we know where that food's coming from, or food that we grew or that we shared with our neighbors, our life is going to change profoundly. And if everybody here begins to do that and gets another few of their friends to do that, we can change this island, we can change these islands, we can change the whole world. But it starts with one mouth at a time, I guess, basically. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to talk specifically about what we're going to put in the hole. So classically with papayas, we really got to give them a good start, okay? So I've got the readout. You guys can get it from later. But what we're going to put in the holes is a mixture. We're going to use cinders. We're going to use rock dust, and rock dust is the salt rock dust. You can get it here locally. It's a byproduct waste of when they make the salt termite barrier. It's fairly cheap. I don't know, $10, $20 a ton. 3 or 4 tons an acre will totally remineralize, turn your ground back into a virgin soil. To me, it's the most wonderful product in the world. It'll open up your soil. It'll deliver all the micronutrients, macronutrients that you need to grow nutrient-dense food. So rock dust is a very important part of the mix, okay? We're going to be using gypsum, calcium sulfate. Sulfur is extremely important when you're growing things like fruits and stuff, because sulfur is directly involved with creating proteins. And when you create, and protein is in the seed of the papaya, there's a little bit of protein in the fruit. But if you want to grow protein, you've got to have the right amount of sulfur and calcium for opening up this clay soil. Okay, we're going to be adding Bokashi, which is what we have. We could be adding EM or something like that, or if we were doing IMO, we could have our rice cultures going, and we could be fermenting, and we could be doing all kinds. But I'm just trying to give you guys a starting point, okay? I'm just trying to be a cheerleader. I mean, I'm going to give you kind of an overview, but I really believe intuitively you guys are going to figure out your own systems, and you can you know, in 20 years or 3 years, 4 years or whatever, start teaching your own people how to do it. Teach your kids how to do it. So, okay, good. We're going to do that. We're going to do that. Let me go through. We got the bucket. Where's that bucket? Over there. Okay, and so papayas have a huge need for phosphorus. And in our soils over here, because phosphorus, remember, when you see the numbers, NPK, right? Everyone knows NPK. Nitrogen, potassium, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. K is potassium. So you think of it, nitrogen is the first growth, is the leaf. Phosphorus is the flowers. And potassium is the fruit. Okay, generally. Not specifically, but generally, basically. If you want to have big fruit, you want to make sure you have potassium. If you want to have your flowers healthy, and papayas are susceptible to blossom end rot, fungal disease, caused by also cold. Down here we don't have that problem. You know, when it gets a cold night, the flowers might fall off before they set. But by having enough phosphorus, it's going to make those flowers a little bit stronger. You get better flower. Better flower means better fruit. So I've got in this bucket, I've got calcium phosphate, which is a 030. I don't understand why they use acid phosphates over here, because we have acid soils. Acid superphosphate is horrible, because all it does is 3/4 of it immediately ties up with the aluminum in the soil and is unavailable. So a commercial farmer is going to have to use 4 times the amount of phosphate just to get a response. And it's either going to tie up in the soil or it's going to wash into the ocean. And we all know about phosphate pollution and stuff like that, and the fragility of our nearshore environment and how important it is for us to take responsibility. So I like to use something called calcium phosphate, which is basically just a mined material. And in our acid soil, it's going to release that phosphate, and it's going to reduce the pH. And then the other substance I've got in here is called KMAD, which is sulfate of potash of magnesia. And it's a mined material, and it gives us the magnesium, it gives us the sulfur, and it gives us our potash. And Hawaiian soil, you have to remember, this isn't the mainland. This is a rainforest. It might look like the mainland, but it's a rainforest. And rainforest soils are extremely fragile. We used to call them insipid soils. They're the first soils. They're really not finished. So when you open it up, it just wants to disappear, and you lose that first layer of fertility. And that's what we see here right now with this clay soil. And when it rains, you see the water rushing over. You don't see a movement of nutrients through the soil. So we use potassium sulfate to try to get the soils to move. And the potassium is going to move the nutrients down into the soil too. So we're going to put that into the mix. And then we're going to add, we have to increase the biology. And one of the ways you increase the biology is by creating food for the organisms, and I like to use molasses. So by far, if all you have is a little spray can, and you got your garden, and you can just take a little bit of molasses, a tablespoon in a gallon of water, and spray your plants with molasses. Molasses has a huge amount of trace elements, huge amounts of that. It stimulates the plant to create good, and it's great, and it changes the soil chemistry and biology, because those sugars change how it's like food for organisms, almost like a probiotic. It's one of the main constituents of the Bokashi EM concept. And so if you've got a wood pile that's not breaking down, spray it with molasses, and all of a sudden you'll see this white fungus appear. And this white fungus is called fire fang or something like that, but it's also very antibiotic. And it's extremely healing to the soil. And so we create this chemistry in the soil, and all of a sudden we start cleaning up the soil. So part of us as stewards of this INA is to try to remediate and to try to bring back the fertility. And I think molasses is extremely, extremely important. And then specifically what I'm going to be adding to this, and I think it's here, got a bag of this. I have mycorrhizal fungi, and they're specific fungi to make healthy roots. And mycorrhizal fungi are the fungi and organisms that live on the root and in the root. And these are the things that actually transfer the nutrients into the plant. In a conventional farming is basically just hydroponic farming. Okay, even if it's in the ground. The soil is basically dead. They're using the soil to hold the plant. They're fertilizing with the rain, with soluble nutrients. Now what happens in that situation is that when they're adding nitrogen fertilizers to the soil, that nitrogen, that nitrate, isn't being converted into protoplasm. They call it protoplasm, or we call it proteins. It's actually absorbed by the plant as nitrate. We all know nitrate poisoning. And I have a feeling that a lot of the problems we have with our children today is they're eating greens and stuff like that haven't been grown in healthy soil. They've been basically grown hydroponically with chemical fertilizers, and they're not getting the proteins, let's say in the kale, that they really need. They're getting more nitrates. And we know statistically and scientifically what nitrates do to our brain, and not a good thing. So it's very important that we create a proper biology, and mycorrhizal fungi are very important in that because they make the transfer. And when we have a strong mycorrhizal fungi, it also creates a healthy plant. That's very important for growing papaya. So I don't see one of the bags that I have. And so what we're going to do is plant, then the big concern everybody has right now is virus, right? Everyone's thinking you can't grow papaya because it gets this virus. So there's a way to protect against virus, and it's scientifically proven in the universities many years ago that humic acids, which is basically a mine material, it's humate, it's a coal overburden. It has very super long chains, very complex chelating kind of thing. Carbon, think carbon connection. Carbon's so important. And that's it. And then humic acid, fulvic acid actually can block the transmission of virus. Clemson study with tobacco mosaic virus has proven it, and they're even proving with the biology. Pseudomonas, I think it's Pseudomonas bacteria that's basically a beneficial bacteria, probably in some of the mixes that I do, also can block virus. We know when you're healthy, you don't get the flu. When you have a healthy internal flora, that's the person not getting it. Somehow, biology can block these things. We don't have to genetically modify things to attempt to save us, okay? What we have to do is, as a farmer, we do things A to B to C to D, okay? And genetic modification... Hi.
I'm a beneficial pest.
Okay.
It's 11 o'clock, so if you guys are free flow with this, it's cool, but I think we should start like...
Let's start digging. Let's start digging some holes and we'll make the mix.
Make the mix? Yeah.
Do we have a tarp? Do we have a tarp, and we'll just make a mix right here? Right there. Perfect. Okay. So the idea, to me, genetic modification is about L, okay? But we gotta take care of these basic things first before we get to the next level. So I think, genetic one day maybe we'll have to do that. But right now I think we can solve these problems just by ourselves. Okay? So here, let's start taking this. Okay?
How much gypsum do you put in? Put the dirt in, mix? Okay. Just put it on top?
Yeah, well, I would put it on top and band it around because you want to kind of pull the roots out. If you want to pull it up.
How do you tell the difference between the male and the female?
The male flowers come out in a big spray. They're like multiple flowers. Okay, the female flower comes out. It's one big flower. The hermaphrodite, and it has no pollen inside it. So it's just all you do is see where the seed forms the ovum. The hermaphrodite flower looks like a female flower, but it's slightly smaller, a little finer. But there's little red, orange kind of pollen in it. And that's hermaphrodite. So the male flower is obviously not going to a lot of flowers. It comes out with a big spray. So the papayas with a bunch of flowers. So that's male. You definitely don't want those.
You need both, male and female?
No, the hermaphrodite, well, if you want seeded females, and all you have is females, maybe you'll leave one male if you want seed. But the hermaphrodite, since it's a perfect flower, yeah, and you get a little better fruit the more seed you have in it. Yeah, but usually you have a hermaphrodite, which is a perfect flower, which means it pollinates itself.
That's the one you want to keep.
That's the one you want to keep.
Is the hermaphrodite.
Okay.
Looks like a female with pollen inside.
Looks like a female with pollen inside.
And usually
Looks like
it's like you cut it in like, they usually start to flower in 1 year or?
And that's 6 or 7 months, it'll be about your height.
Okay.
And they'll start flowering at about this height.
Okay.
And then you cut them at the ground. You don't pull anything out. You don't want to disturb the roots.
Okay.
Okay. But you plant them together like that.
Too.
That's excellent.
Yeah. Bring some mulch over here.
John, what if a bird planted a papaya plant in my yard? How will I know if it's GMO?
You gotta have a test kit. And they have a test kit called beta glucuronidase. You get glucuronic acid, and you cut open the papaya seed, or take a little small leaf, and you drop some glucuronic acid. And if it turns blue, you know it's genetically modified. That takes having the test kit.
Where do you get that?
I don't know. I've got a bunch at my house.
How much are
Ask the university. Maybe the university will do a test over here. If more people ask to have their papaya tested, maybe they'll figure it out.
That's what it looks like.
Pretty cheap. It's not a big deal. It's just the time and setting up the or taking it away. You have to be very, very clean. It's super clean. Well, it's not really sterilized. It's very clean. Any kind of dirt might
This is what breaks over. Calcium sulfate.
more.
How do you keep your seeds from being GMO?
I'm isolated, and I'm pretty sure I don't have any GMOs around. I've grown these plants for 30 years. And I tested my made some other.
John was showing them how to plant around 4 buckets. John, where are you? Right here.
A little bit of mulch, on top.
Is that to keep the moisture there or what?
Moisture, ecosystem, keep the weeds down.
Is that compost?
Nope, this is just mulch. Yeah, mulch. Just mulch. There he is.
What was sprinkled on the ground around it for the mulch?
The mix of
Soul
John
buster or whatever. What is that?
So you don't want it up close to the plant?
not so much.
Okay.
Right close, but not right on it.
A question. He was saying he uses his compost half cooked,
Yeah.
half done.
Yeah.
But then how do you keep all the other plants from sprouting up? That's my problem. Every
Well,
time I use my compost, I'm growing everything.
sure. You know, that's why I like the EM technology so much.
Katie, I'm getting another
In my world, I like unfinished compost. I call it fermentation.
Uh-huh.
And
Your
I-
Bokashi
Yeah, I
stuff.
don't lose anything. And if we cover that, if we get a nice moisture content in this material, we can feel there's 30 to 40% moisture. I can't squeeze water out of it, but I know there's wet's wet. That's definitely wet. If I inoculate and cover this for 3 weeks, it's finished, it's ready to use. Any weed seeds have been digested. It's a 100% clean compost, or in this case, a fermentation. That's why I like cover, kill the seed by fermentation in 3 weeks.
Okay.
Don't have to turn and turn and turn and still have weed seeds coming up. Oh no, more.
Also, mulch on top of it will help too.
Excellent. If you have clean mulch, like this is a clean mulch right
That'll
here.
smother the
That's going to
seed.
smother. And this reason why we do till-free farming. If the seeds are on the surface and we mulch over them, hard for them to sprout. And then if they keep sprouting, we keep mulching on top, less and less seed bank. As soon as I dug in that ground and pulled it up, thousands of seeds were unearthed. They're going to sprout all around that papaya because we've unearthed them. But as long as we keep layering, the only seed we'll have is wind blow that comes in. So mulch, biggest friend. This is going to hold water. It's going to loosen the soil too. This is part of your soil buster program because the microorganisms will go, wow, we've got a covering of carbon on top. We can now start eating that and we'll loosen up the soil around it. So now the papaya has room to stretch out into fertile ground. It's been loosened.
Made like a habit.
In larger plantings like citrus, I would put this same kind of ring. It would be about 6 feet away, and I would put it 2 feet high around the whole thing. In very windy areas, this serves as a windbreak. A little donut. The wind comes in, it hits the donut, it begins up. The wind now spirals around the tree and covers the tree. The harder the wind blows, the greater the spiral strength becomes. And so that tree is solid without a support, without a windbreak screen in front of it. Just the donut-shaped mulch. And that ecosystem's huge. If you're in a dry area, you've added thousands of gallons of water retention right there. I'm not sure. I think these are watered as needed, but right now, probably not so much because we've got our rain. These are watered as needed, I believe.
When you say clean mulch, you mean it has no...
Clean meaning there's no weed seed. If we looked at that pile that we pulled the mulch from, we can see that there's lots of fungus. There's lots of, the mushrooms have digested it pretty well.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been digested, so I don't think there's weed seed viable in that. It's been long enough. And plus, it was made from a material, it looks like ohia and other stuff, right? What this was, beans. It was clean to begin with. It wasn't lots of weed seeds to start.
And then I walked up a little bit late.
Yes.
When you're talking about this compost, you want to compost the fermentation. It's because you start your compost pile and then you use your formula. Is that what you were saying?
Yes. If I have a compost pile, if I were still doing compost, I would add that bokashi to my compost pile. And if I still turned it, it would enhance that by 30%. You'll have your compost 30% sooner than you normally would.
So what do you do instead?
Instead of that, I ferment. I keep things in place. Like, let's say we have this pile of mulch over there. I want to make fertilizer out of it. Instead of a big hill, I flat it out to only 3 feet tall, a big loaf. I then put bokashi or effective microorganism liquid on there, and then make sure the moisture content's high, 30 to 40%, but not wet. Then I cover that with a piece of plastic for 3 weeks. In the case of my tomatoes, when I was growing tomatoes, I had this 30 yards of green waste, of wood chips. So I inoculate the entire pile, cover it up, it's ready. Now I'm not going to use that all at one time. So at one end, I just open it up, I take away what I need, close it back up. The 100% of green waste I brought in is still 100%. I didn't lose none of it. And the work that I'm doing is 3 times as effective as composting. So that's why I choose that.
Okay.
That's why I choose fermentation.
But it's just mainly yard waste, it's not vegetable scraps, stuff like that.
You can do anything. Vegetable scraps are using currently, like the schools in Waimanalo and Waianae, they take their kitchen waste and they bokashi it. They sprinkle bokashi.
They keep like the rodents and stuff out of it.
It's completely sealed in a 5-gallon bucket. There's no flies, there's no rodents, there's no exposure to the air. So we can count the buckets. We say, wow, we have 100 buckets Now we have a national disaster and there's no food coming to the island. What's going on? Those 100 buckets are edible food for humans. We go to our waste pile and we eat it. And we can say we've got 100 buckets, we can feed 100 families for the next 30 days. We know we can calculate very quickly. We pull those buckets apart, the bones still look like bones, make soup. The vegetable still looks vegetable, eat it, whatever. It's food. Secondarily, it's food for animals. Third, it's food for the ground. So we're talking a sustainable system, Bokashi, not just a preferred method to grow food.
So if you have a 5-gallon bucket full of kitchen waste,
yes,
you just take and throw like how much of that Bokashi in it?
It takes about 3/4 of a gallon to do an entire 5-gallon bucket, and usually it's done slowly. You put like a newspaper shredded at the bottom to suck up juice. Then we put our kitchen waste and a handful of Bokashi. You repeat the process until your bucket is full. When your bucket is full at the end of the week, leave it closed and set it off. Date it, because in 3 weeks it's going to be ready. It'll be ready to bury in the ground, and you can ferment it in the ground for 3 more weeks and make a dirt out of it, soil. Or you can put it around your orchard and cover it with mulch immediately.
And the ink from the paper is not a problem?
Most ink from Hawaiian papers is soybean base. We went through this with Recycle Hawaii years ago, and there was a big push. There are some inserts and things. Again,
glossy paper.
It's not so bad. Again, because we have all these toxins in our world, EM and Bokashi, they handle this stuff for us. pH balance, EM, 6.5 guaranteed now. I don't have to measure that. I can add my calcium to help support it, but the 6.5 is going to be guaranteed because of the EM. So I save huge amounts in technical services. Because people say, oh, will you look at my soil sample? I say, sure, I can read your soil sample, I can look at it, but this is what I'm going to do. And they go, what? And I go, Bokashi, your soil's right. And whatever balances there are, we can bring up if we look at your soil sample. But it's about getting that microbiology in place, because the microbiology that's around us really has just about everything we need. Just about everything we need. We need to just get that cycle going. Biochar, he didn't mention much, but biochar added to this system, calcium requirement is over after 5 years, according to the university. If you're applying dolomite or gypsum, whether you're Malcolm Mackay, after 5 years, no more needed. Bokashi, excuse me, the biochar holds it in the soil.
Okay.
So, as an amendment, when people ask me, oh, it's going to be expensive to put out the biochar. Yes. And then after 5 years, you won't be putting out any calcium. What's the expense on that for your lifetime? So it's very much a savings, quickly. And then the quality of the environment, the produce, the water retention, etc. is going to go up as well with biochar. Biochar is a great home for our microorganisms and for our nutrients.
Dumb question, maybe.
No.
I get the free mulch from the Xeriscape Gardens or the Dump
Nice.
Road.
Nice.
Most of the time it's full of ants. So is that going to bring me aphids? Is that going to be a problem if I use the mulch? I stopped getting it from them.
Here's a story for you. Part of my work is to go on... Yes!
What's that?
Part of my work is to go on fancy places, nice high-end homes, and they tell me, I've got ants crawling up the wall by the thousand. I've got red ants in the yard. They bit my dog. Bokashi on the red ant pile. Boom, come back tomorrow. Where did they go?
Okay.
Why did they go?
Okay.
You know what happened?
Like the miracle.
You know what happened? Ants are farmers.
Yeah.
They go down and they fungus farm, right? They're putting up their fungus. They take the sweet, they make fungus in the ground, right? My Bokashi ate all their fungus. Oh, store's over. Nothing to eat. Move out.
Really? Okay.
Crash population, 90%.
Thank you.
That's the result. This Bokashi is based.
Thank you. Unbelievable.
Sorry?
Yeah, so the spider.
Oh, you got a really big spider.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my God.
Okay.
Oh my God.
Oh, look, look.
What's wrong? Pyrexium comes from chrysanthemum.
Am I in your name?
It's just a kills insect. It kills fish. I hardly use any of these. But in specific things like this, I would spray just pyrethrum.
Safe.
Yeah, fairly safe, but I wouldn't.
Where would that disease? I mean, no, he's got a mix that but I don't know.
It smells like citrus.
What does it have?
And that's what's causing the leaves to kind of crinkle up.
I didn't spray on it yet, but that's spider mites. And then you want to use like an organic insecticide like pyrethrum rotenone. Will kill spider mites. And 2 or 3 sprays over a couple of weeks, and that should clean it up. You know, a lot of times when you have an infestation like this on a young papaya tree, sometimes we'll just cut it right off and let a new one grow up. But we're going to just treat this.
Okay, for beetles and I have a problem not on papaya.
With beetles?
Yeah.
Well, there's a thing called spinosad, which is Monterey spinosad, which is really good on beetles. And there's another thing for beetles would be Boviana bassiana, which is a mycotrol, they call it, or Botanigard. Is one of the things.
Neem? Is that Japanese? Neem oil?
Neem.
Okay.
And this spread, this thing that I'm doing it should work on that. But beetles, a lot of times the beetles are coming out. Are you talking about
like at night in the
at night? Yeah. So all those beetles are living down
in
here
the soil.
Okay.
Right.
And so what you do is you put a little piece of paper right around your thing, and at night just go like that, and they'll all fall down right on here. And then there's grubs living in the soil, and so there's also biologically you can put in the soil to kill the grub.
I've heard about coffee grounds. Does that do anything?
Remember, the grubs are in the soil,
Okay.
and then they turn into beetles.
Right.
Okay, and so the beetles are on the tree. So if you go out at night and just put like a piece of material around here and go like that, the beetles will fall down and you can collect the beetles.
Okay.
If you only have a few trees, you can pretty much.
Okay.
What are these beetles called? Are those the little
Those
shiny black ones?
usually those are called full of rose beetles that you're talking about. They look like little Japanese beetles, but they're not really Japanese. They're kind of brown.
Pyrethrum will take care of them.
Not really. No, beetles are hard.
They are.
To kill. You really got to get it on them.
What about scale?
Scale? Yeah. Now the scale is interesting because that Boviana bassiana will take care of that. If you have scale and you have a chance to find scale that's been turned white, you ever see scale that's been turned white too? Yeah. Take that and put it in a blender and blend it up and spray it on the other scale. They have a disease. So you take the disease scale, put it in a blender, blend it up, and then spray it on the other scale, and it'll get rid of the scale. But scale can be killed with soap, and it can be killed with neem, it can be killed with pyrethrum, it can be killed with a lot of things.
Diseasing a disease.
Yeah. And a lot of times with even aphids, I'll just come and crush the aphids if I just have a few trees, because the dead aphids will create a disease that'll get the other aphids away. So you just crush the plant, crush the things on the leaves.
Interesting.
Boviana bassiana. All right, so now we're going to talk about Okay, we're going to spray ice.
We're going to all spray ice. Yeah, this spray him.
If you can gather your tools and your...
So you want me to run and go get them right now?
Yeah, get a sprayer. I'm going to make the spray up real fast. Because you got some spider mite in this. And you really want
Does anybody have anything clean right now?
No one's clean. So we're going to go with about 4 ounces of this stuff, okay? Yes. That's about 4 ounces. Yeah. Right? Okay, well, what we want to do is usually we have a blender, but that didn't come.
And this mixes in the pamphlet,
This mixes in the pamphlet. Now what we're doing here is we're creating almost a polymer mix, and when this dries it'll be filmed. It'll create a film around the plant. It's like egg temperature. And usually I would blend this up. Bear with me.
No, the gold flakes.
I'm going. No, we're getting there. This is the polymer mix.
It's the egg.
Egg and milk, egg and yogurt. Now, biodynamics talks about this. A lot of times when you have a virus disease, if you study biodynamics, they talk about putting fermented milk on stuff. They also talk about putting manures and compost on the barks of trees to protect from disease. This is just a slight extension of that, because instead of the manure contains the humic acid. So what we're going to do is we're going to add the humic acids to this. So we got molasses. Put a little molasses in. I'll have a specific about a tablespoon or 2 per gallon. It's like cooking now. I'm sorry, you guys. And a little bit of seaweed, maxi crop, couple of tablespoons per gallon.
Liquid kelp.
Liquid kelp, it's the same stuff. This is just dry kelp, not liquid. A little bit of humic. This is the key to the protecting from viruses. Is the humic acid. So you want to put a couple of teaspoons.
At the humic acid store.
Yeah. This is pure carbon, so this will turn this whole thing black. It's amazing. And if I had some EM, I'd put it on. I don't have any Bokashi. No, I don't want to do that. No, it's got to go through a sprayer. So I think we're on the game we're in now. You know, we could probably. Oh, I'm going to add a little bit of some organic pyrethrum. Okay.
Or neem oil. Like, do you need some Bokashi?
No, it's got to be liquid.
Is it either that or neem oil?
Neem oil, if we had some neem oil, but I'm